Who is funding the Black Lives Matter insurrection? Occupying Till He Comes at Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Welcome, friends. This is David Schnitker, your host for today's program. Thank you for joining us. Just a reminder that these programs are supported by your gifts to this ministry. If you would like to contribute to this ongoing faith ministry, which deals with Bible prophecy and current events, simply go to our website to contribute. Our website address is www.swpm.us. You will find a donate link on the homepage. The website address again is www.swpm.us. Thank you for your prayers and support for this faith ministry. It is a great privilege to have Carol Rushton back on the program today to discuss her brand new July 2020 Last Days Beacon article. Now, if you would like extra copies of this particular article, I'll share how you can obtain that at the end of today's program. I've had the joy of knowing and working with Carol for many years at a previous ministry and for the nearly 5 years at Southwest Prophecy Ministries. Carol is an accomplished author and broadcaster and had the privilege of living in Jerusalem for 8 years while working at the Jerusalem Post. She recently authored the book Understanding Israel and the Middle East for our ministry. We are so pleased that she was able to write this book, and it's available from us. If you have not yet ordered this 175-page book, let me encourage you to go to the bookstore at swpm.us and do so. Now, without trying to flatter Carol, I would say that she's one of the best researchers and writers I have ever known. She's had great training since childhood, as her late father, Noah Hutchings, authored over 100 books and recorded over 10,000 radio programs. She began editing radio scripts for her father in the 8th grade. And in her spare time, she reads light tomes such as The Road to Serfdom by Friedrich Hayek and Edersheim's The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah. And so Carol has a great deal of depth. She loves the Lord. She loves the Word of God. She loves to read great books that are life-transforming. So I assigned to Carol the delightful task of researching this topic. George Soros, the shadowy figure behind the globalist takeover of the world. So, Carol, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. But I don't think I've ever had such a great introduction.
Well, it's all true.
Well, thank you.
It's all true. I mean, I have Edersheim's book. I can barely lift it, much less read it. But those are the kinds of books you read.
Well, I mean, the way you read this book is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And you just do a little bit at a time, and you eventually work through it. Absolutely.
It takes a lot of resilience and a lot of determination to read books like that. But that's how you grow.
Yes,
that's
absolutely.
How you grow.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to be talking about George Soros. I think it's kind of, in a way, a good follow-on to the June article that I wrote on the pandemic, the Wuhan pandemic, because I think that the insurrection that we're seeing in America today is just the next step in the deconstruction, or the destruction, you might say, of America. And you can't understand the destruction of America without understanding George Soros. So the first question, Carol, George Soros is a mysterious figure to many, and of course we would both agree that he's quite photogenic. I'm sure you have a picture of him in your home. He is quite photogenic and mysterious.
Very mysterious.
You don't see him too much on television.
No.
He's what we would call the hidden hand that basically controls things from behind the scenes. Mm-hmm. So could you tell our audience a little bit about Soros and what he is most famous for in Europe? Because he's from Hungary.
Yes. He's originally from Hungary, Jewish family. He's not known for being a religious Jew at all. Neither was his family. and their conservatives are criticized and attacked whenever they bring up George Soros and some of his nefarious connections. Said, well, you can't do that, you're being anti-Semitic. Well, he really didn't go through any persecution. I think his family, tried to present themselves as Christians to get out of it, but they really didn't suffer. As
let me interrupt you. There is a rumor, and it's somewhat controversial, that when he was in Hungary during the Nazi regime, as a 14-year-old, he cooperated with the Nazis in confiscating some Jewish property. And some say that he might have even turned in some Jews for money. I've read different sources, and so it's not something that's nailed down, but it seems that he has admitted to complicity with the Nazis.
I wouldn't be surprised. Wouldn't be surprised at that at all, given the kind of person that he's turned into. But he went to, after the World War II, he went to university. He also studied in London, became quite enamored of liberalism and liberal economic theory. And he got from his mentor called Popper in university this idea about, wouldn't it be great to have an open society where people were more tolerant and more accepting of people, which has led to his eventual founding of his Open Society Foundation. So I think that's pretty much where he got that idea. And he's known in England as the man who broke the Bank of England. And he destroyed the pound, and then got great benefit he bought a lot of the pound shares of the pound, and then he sold them and made quite a bit of money. And so really, I don't think there are some people that really do not like him.
So he didn't become rich by building things.
No, he did
building
not.
Building a business, building hotels, etc.,
No.
offering services.
No.
He did it through currency manipulation.
Currency manipulation. He was also a hedge fund manager, financial in finances and stuff. So he has that type of a background. So he's not really, he tries to make himself as a philanthropist and entrepreneur, and he just wants a more just and fair and an equitable society where people are all treated the same, except for him, of course, and his very rich buddies.
Right.
that he does a lot of things with. So
you mentioned the Open Society Foundation, which you mentioned in your article he founded in the early 1990s. And through that, he has funded several other groups, some of which we might be well known, others, probably most of them are not well known to the general public. So share something about some of the groups that are funded through his Open Society Foundation and why they are so dangerous.
Well, I think one of the things that one of the most infamous groups, we'll put it that way, is Color of Change. What makes Color of Change so dangerous is that one of the founders is Van Jones. Van Jones is an openly admitted communist. He has started several other organizations. Storm.
Didn't he work during the Obama administration?
Yes, I was about to bring that up. He was Obama's Green Job Czar. And it was an open communist. They knew he was a communist when they brought him into the Obama administration.
Doesn't he work for CNN now?
Yes.
I think he's a CNN consultant.
Yes.
So they have an open communist on their staff.
Yes. And he's not bashful or shy about any of this. You can find this information. It's widely available on the internet. And he started this group, Color of Change, back in, I believe, 2005. And their goals are very radical, very Marxist, Leninist, communist type of thought. And they deliberately use their funds to basically incite violence and riots throughout the United States. So, and the Open Society is very open and honest about some of the groups, not all, but some of the groups that they support And so George Soros has given a lot of money to them. You might have heard in the news recently that Jennifer Aniston, the actress, and her ex-husband Brad Pitt, the actor, each gave $1 million to Color Change because they felt so guilty about what has happened to black people in our country.
So they're trying to expunge their white privilege guilt?
Right.
Okay.
Right. And I'd like to bring up, actually, this leads me to a book that I'd like to recommend. Shelby Steele is black, and he grew up in America when they had the separate bathrooms and the separate water fountains and things like that. He has written some tremendous books, and the one that I'm reading right now is called White Guilt. And it's how liberal white Americans have destroyed the great promise of Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights area, have really destroyed the promise of equal opportunity for the black community, and really destroyed that, and it gives great insight into what's going on behind the white guilt and the white supremacy, and everybody who's white is guilty of white privilege, and you need to repent, and you need to. So it's a really eye-opening book, and I think, you know, that's one of the books that every American should read. And
Shelby Steele, White Guilt. Yes,
and I never heard of Shelby Steele until Mark Levin had him on his Sunday night program on Fox. And I've heard of, you know, Walter E. Williams and Thomas Sowell, but Shelby Steele was somebody new that I'd never heard of. Black, used to be a radical liberal, now a great conservative. So he's got several books out there. I'm just starting to read his book White Guilt.
Well, that book title reminds me of a new religion. I definitely don't subscribe to it, but many white liberals do. And that's the religion of white self-loathing.
Yes.
And there's several tenets to that, which of course you have to despise yourself. You have to believe that as a white person you have all kinds of privileges that black people don't have.
Right.
And so you have to atone by obeisance and obedience to black people, and reparations as well. So it's an atonement through works, but it is an actual religion. I mean, it's not a 501c3 religion, but you can't argue with these people because it is actually, it's a heartfelt belief system that is rooted in self-loathing.
Yes, and Shelby Steele addresses that in his book. And even what he says in his book is that even, you know, small little acts that could or could not be actual racist acts are blown up so far out of proportion that the whites have to feel that they have to match up to that proportion that they're feeling, even though the act itself was really doesn't deserve that. And I mean, and this I think is behind the push today that George Soros is very, very much behind. That even though the people living today had nothing to do with slavery,
absolutely not,
and had nothing, very little, if nothing, to do with.
So it's a form of collective guilt.
It's a form
of
collective
guilt. We no longer are responsible for our individual behavior, but our collective guilt.
Yes, our collective guilt as a nation because we had slavery at one point in our history. So we all have to make constant repentance.
Acts of humiliation.
And acts of humiliation. You know,
it's a religion, isn't it?
It really is. So, George Soros funds Color Change. Color Change is very open and honest about what they do. Another group I would that you don't really hear too much about. The Southern Poverty Law Center, very radical group. I didn't address that, but you can find that on the internet. They're very, very radical group. They demonize anybody who's not.
Anything that's Christian or conservative is demonized by the Southern Poverty. Yes.
You're automatically deemed a racist. Another group that you don't hear very much about is the Mayor's Migration Council. And these major cities around the United States, the mayors are heavily involved in this group. And their goal, you'll be so thrilled, their goal is to bring to your city what's happening in Seattle, Washington right now.
Autonomous zones.
Yes.
Oh, that's what we need in downtown Oklahoma City.
Yeah, that's their ultimate goal.
A new chop shop.
And that's what is, that's basically their goal.
Okay.
And
well, let's talk about another group that we're hearing a lot about in the last 4 weeks or so since the unfortunate killing of George Floyd, and that is Black Lives Matter. Is Soros funding Black Lives Matter, and what are they trying to accomplish with their many peaceful protesters across America?
Okay. Well, now I've heard several very conservative TV and radio personalities talk about that George Soros, the Open Society, has given $33 million to Black Lives Matter. Now, that could have been on their website at one time, the Open Society website. When I recently checked into this, I did not find it there, but it's very easy. They could have taken it off. Because
plus, they may be laundering their money through other corporations.
Oh, sure. That's what they do
which
a
are
lot.
Giving millions of dollars to Black Lives Matter.
Oh, sure.
Various corporations.
Sure. Black Lives Matter, within the last year, they spent $1 to $2 million just on travel. Black Lives Matter also spent like between $1 and $2 million just on consultants and consulting fees. So this is not just this little, group.
It's not grassroots.
It's not grassroots at all. I was involved in the Tea Party movement. We had nothing. We had nothing. And, we would scrape up money between us to do whatever the small little things that we were doing. So we really didn't have hardly anything. It was really a group effort. You really had to work hard. Black Lives Matter is funded very, very well. And the one of the founders of Black Lives Matter openly claims that they're Marxists and they're trained Marxists to go out and
I think the three women that founded it are all self-proclaimed Marxists.
They're all self-proclaimed Marxists. They're not shy about it at all. And their goal, which they are very proud of, is to bring the revolution to the United States of America and overthrow the current government and institute a Marxist government. This is what Black Lives Matter is being used for. One of the things that really upsets me and irritates me about Black Lives Matter is that not all black lives are equal. A white cop who kills a black person, that's the most horrendous act of racism that's ever committed in the history of the world. But there are blacks being slaughtered in Chicago every single week. 14, I think, were just killed this past weekend as we're recording this.
Oh, yes.
There was 18.
Over 100 shootings in Chicago in just one weekend.
In just one weekend.
Black on black, for the most part.
Yes, small children that have been killed. Horrendous. But Black Lives Matter doesn't ever care about those black lives. They only care about the black lives that they can use for political purposes to stir up people and get them upset.
But
so
we do know that Black Lives Matter is very concerned about Planned Parenthood and all the black babies that are being slaughtered in black neighborhoods.
Yes.
I'm sure they have marches all the time in front of Planned Parenthood facilities.
Yeah, well, you never see those. I guess
those black lives don't matter.
Those black lives don't matter at all either.
Right.
And it's really terrible that they don't address these things. Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood, was a racist. She hated minorities, and she definitely wanted to get rid of the blacks in America, period. And she was going to use black pastors. She was very open and honest about that. And I just can't even repeat the things that she said about black people because it's so horrible. So it's...
Wouldn't you say she was a true racist?
Yes.
I mean,
absolutely.
The whole Planned Parenthood organization, which, by the way, Bill Gates' father was one of the executives with that, is a very racist organization.
It's a very racist organization. Right. And, but you don't see Black Lives Matter looting and destroying Planned Parenthood clinics, abortion clinics. They're not marching in front of Planned Parenthood. They're not, looting and rioting and tearing down Planned Parenthood abortion clinics.
They seem to specialize in torching and looting black-owned businesses.
Yes.
Which doesn't make any sense at all.
No.
If the issue is racial equality, they're not going about it in a very good way.
No, and they should not go to George Soros' house or mansions or Bill and Melinda Gates
yes.
or
so
Michael Bloomberg.
I guess their white privilege is okay as long as they're funding Black Lives Matter. Their white privilege has been atoned for.
Yes.
Well, let's talk about a recent Trump rally in Tulsa that took place just a few days ago, our time. This was, of course, the first rally post-COVID in the general election. We're almost in the general election time frame. And, of course, there's been a lot of attention in the press for how poorly attended it was. And, it marks Trump's decline and all of those things. But you have a friend that was actually on the ground at the Trump rally in Tulsa, and it relates to the whole subject of Black Lives Matter. So what did your friend observe?
Well, she was a volunteer. And she had actually spent the previous night at a hotel close to there so that she didn't have to worry about driving to Tulsa from Oklahoma City. And so she had like 2 or 3 bags, big bags, stuffed with Trump buttons and Trump hats and banners and signs and lots of things like that. And when there was a special entrance for them that they had to go to, and they were telling her, "Oh yeah, you can just go up there, and there'll be police there, and they'll take care of you." And there were no police at the entrance she had to go to. And as she was trying to get there, and she was carrying all these bags, 3 black men approached her, or were starting to approach her, and threatening to do violence to her by taking away her bags and destroying everything that was in them. And so there was also, Black Lives Matter was also very open and honest about the fact that they were going to bus protesters in. So I think that it scared a lot of people away, because the prior day, I saw pictures of people camping out and wanting so they would be able to get in. So I think that the threat of violence and scared some people away. That's why the rally was not as well attended, probably. Also, the police presence was not what it should have been, and so I think that affected the attendance.
And I had heard also that, not on the mainstream news, but the independent media, that Black Lives Matter actually blocked one of the entrances so that the folks who were waiting in line couldn't get in.
Yeah. Cheryl, my friend, also said something about that they were preventing or trying to prevent people from coming into the rally. So the police really didn't help much.
So this is going to be quite an interesting election season as Donald Trump and his campaign attempt other rallies in other cities. Would you anticipate a more militant presence of Black Lives Matter and Antifa trying to suppress the number of people that are able to get into the rallies?
Sure. And I think that that's a really stupid thing to do, because when you do that to Americans, they'll get even with you one way or the other.
Right.
And they may just get even at the ballot box.
Yes, I'm hoping.
That makes people mad.
Right. Yeah. This is communist thuggery.
It is.
This is how communism always comes into power, through thuggery, through their brown shirts, through their Bolsheviks.
Because they can't be honest.
No, they cannot. All they can do is intimidate and harass. And so it's coming out into the open now as we're basically into the election season. And one final question here. Since this is a Bible prophecy ministry, and get your read on this question. How does George Soros fit into Bible prophecy? And of course, the question on everyone's mind is George Soros the Antichrist?
Well, I don't think George Soros is the Antichrist.
Okay.
I think that'd be a little too obvious. Plus, he's old. and
90 years young.
Yes.
And so photogenic.
And but he really doesn't look good at 90 years old, and he's not.
He never looked good.
Yeah, no.
No.
And he's not very charismatic as far as that aspect of his personality. And when you think of the Antichrist, you think of somebody who's very charismatic, very young, vibrant, vital, able to lie repeatedly, but everybody's so taken with his charismatic presence. I mean, and the Bible says that he'll obtain the kingdom by flatteries. So you're talking about a very, very attractive personage in appearance and personality, and that's just not George Soros.
So if he's not the Antichrist, do you see him playing a role in Bible prophecy or in advancing a biblical agenda as far as prophecy?
I think he is right now, because he's funding the groups that will eventually, we don't know exactly when, but I think we're getting closer and closer all the time, just by the events that are happening in our own country and around the world, by helping to bring in the age of the Antichrist, because George Soros doesn't have any allegiance to any one or anything except for himself, and that's what they all do. So I think it's possible that he could be one of the 10 kings.
Okay.
I mean, the United Nations has already divided the world into 10 economic regions, and I think that George Soros could maybe be one of those kings that promotes the advancement of the Antichrist. I think he's definitely working for a one world government, which we know is going to come in soon.
And certainly we know that for world government to occur, the United States as it is, or as it has been established, has to go. We can't be a limited constitutional republic and be part of a world government.
No.
So America has to come down.
Yes.
And I think George Soros is certainly working overtime in that direction to destroy America as we have known it.
Yes, definitely him and all of his very wealthy, rich buddies that he pals around with. They're all working for bringing the United States down, because they can't bring the other countries up to our level. That would be you don't want other countries being successful, because that means that you don't have any power.
Right.
And George Soros wants to hang on. He wants to. He craves power, just as a lot of his wealthy friends do. And so you can't bring other countries up, so you have to bring the United States down.
So America has to become weak, independent, and malleable and controllable, and
you can do that through controlling people's emotions.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, this has been a great discussion. Thank you, Carol, for sharing your findings on this very fascinating topic. And we are out of time for today, but I appreciate this excellent discussion. And friends, we are offering today an excellent article to accompany this interview. It is our July 2020 Last Days Beacon article entitled George Soros, the shadowy figure behind the globalist takeover of the world. You may order 5 copies of this article for a donation of $5 or 25 copies for a $15 contribution. Just go to our website, www.swpm.us, and go to our bookstore. Type in the subject, George Soros. Again, the website, www.swpm.us. Well, friends, thank you for joining us for today's podcast, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, this is your host, David Schnitker. Thanks for listening.